Good evening, everyone. This is Fenna, and this is a guide to the Safari Daddy, Winston. In this guide, I'm going to talk about the purpose of Winston, when to pick him, what maps and what composition he fits into, and I'm going to go through all of his abilities, giving you tips and information on each one, and at the end of it, hopefully, you'll be a stronger monkey because of it. So what is Winston's purpose? Obviously, he's a tank, but let's go into a little bit more detail. The way that Winston tanks is extremely fast-paced. He's high mobility, and he doesn't have a shield like Reinhardt or D.Va that can just directly soak a lot of damage. Instead, the shield needs to be used a lot more strategically, and due to his short-range weapon, most of the time the most efficient way to use the shield will be right on the enemy's faces. This means that Winston is often in a lot of danger, and you need a lot of awareness and experience to be able to judge when to jump in, as you're going to need your teammates backing you up. You don't want to jump into a fight when you know it's going to be 4 vs 6, for example, as you're going to get focused down really quickly, and you'll get wrecked. All of this causes Winston to be a high-pressure tank who relies on disruption of the enemies for your teammates to be able to do damage. The general idea with Winston most of the time is to jump onto the enemies, pop your shield down, and have your teammates follow up very quickly behind you while the enemies are focusing on you and shooting you, and you're zoning in and out of the shield to soak as much damage as possible. While Winston's main purpose is to disrupt and get the attention focused on him, he's also great at killing squishy targets. Even though he doesn't do a lot of DPS with his weapon, he has the high mobility to be able to get on top of them, even if they're hidden away at the back. So pretty much all the time you'll see Winston focusing on the squishes or chasing down someone who's on very low HP. Alright, so that's what Winston is all about. Let's have a look at his weapon and all of his abilities in detail and learn how to play him optimally. Alright, so first off, let's look at his weapon, the taser. The taser is extremely low DPS at only 60 damage per second, but it does have the advantage of being able to hit multiple targets. You can hit up to 3 targets with a taser, meaning you can go up to 180 damage per second, which is actually an insane amount of DPS. Not only that, but it also comes out as a cone in front of him, meaning that you don't really have to aim it. This makes Winston a great pick against heroes that are hard to hit, like Genji or Tracer, so keep that in mind if your team is struggling to deal with the more annoying heroes. It also goes through shields. Now, while you're not generally going to be targeting a Reinhardt through a shield, it makes his own shield a lot more powerful. You can pop the shield down and then shoot through it while the enemy can't shoot you, which is huge. It also goes through deflect, which makes him a great counterpick to Genji. Next up is Leap. This is what makes Winston extremely high mobility. He can jump really far, and it's on a pretty short cooldown. Mastering this ability is essential to being good at Winston. You need to be able to get the height and distance you want instantly without thinking about it. This comes purely through practice and experience. As said before, Winston is great at targeting squishes, and Leap is the way to do that. You can jump straight onto them. Jumping straight up in the air with Leap is a great little trick if you're in the middle of a group fight. You can use that time to reload your taser, make it harder for the enemies to hit you, and then come back down with some Leap damage. Which brings me to the next point. Leap does do damage. It's only 50 damage and it's only in a small AoE, but obviously you want to get that damage in. So make sure you land on the heroes that you want to attack. Another extremely important skill of Winston is knowing every single health pack location, so you can instantly jump out of a fight onto a health pack and then jump back into the fight. This gives you so much more sustain and allows you to put on a lot more pressure. Jump onto people to get their attention. If you jump into a group, it's very hard for them not to focus the big ass monkey that's blasting away at them with the taser, which gives a lot of space for your teammates to be able to do damage behind you. And again, is probably the main purpose of Winston. Awareness. This is where I see Winston players mess up the most. I very often see lower level Winston players taking a fight that they cannot possibly take due to them not being aware of where their team is. You'll often see low-level Winstons jumping in pretty much 1 vs 6 or rather some kind of outnumbered battle. You need to be always looking where your team is, and even better communicating on voice comms on when you're going to jump onto the enemies. The more in sync you are with your teammates, the faster they will be able to put out damage as you jump on. As said, Winston is there to distract the enemies, and your teammates need to be there to back you up to shoot them. And it needs to be somewhat of an even fight. Generally, you're going to be looking for even numbers. The ability to leap to chase down low HP heroes is a massive strength of Winston. If you don't have the speed anywhere else, Winston is perfect for picking off those heroes that might have gotten away if you didn't have him. Alright, onto his shield. So the first purpose of the shield obviously is to protect himself and his teammates. However, as a short duration and a long cooldown, it needs to be used a lot more strategically than something like Reinhardt's barrier. You don't want to go plopping this down on whatever location you can at every single cooldown, because then it won't be impactful. Be intelligent and think about when and where you're going to place it down. Ideally, every time you use it, it should be soaking the full 800 damage, or saving yourself or a teammate from death. The main general use of the shield is going to be after you leap into a group fight. Most fights in Overwatch at the higher levels are group versus group, and Winston is usually the initiator. Throwing that shield down to soak damage as your teammates back you up and do damage behind you is probably the best use of the shield you'll get. However, that's not going to be the only use. You can use the shield to protect your own allies when they're doing their own ultimates. For example, when Reaper does his ultimate, you can just pop the bubble down, he'll be fully protected, he can still damage everyone else who's around. You can use it to protect against enemy ultimates. For example, if a McCree goes for a high noon and you need to protect your team against it, it's a perfect use for a shield. Basically, if you're not using it for a big group fight to soak all of the damage, you need to look for key points where you can either protect your allies so they can do the damage that they need to do, or protect them from dying so that an engagement can swing in your favor. Using the shield well is going to take a lot of experience of knowing which points of damage are really going to swing a battle, so you know exactly when to use a shield. As said when we talked about the taser, it can go through shields, so a good trick with Winston is to be able to zone back and forth in and out of a shield to bait the enemy into shooting the shield while you can damage them. Alright, so let's have a look at Primal Rage. So Primal Rage is pretty much just a second life for Winston. Now obviously it gives him a load more HP as well, but generally you want to be using it as a second life as it fully heals you up. So if you're down at 1 HP and then you pop the ultimate, you go all the way up to 1000 HP. So basically you're making him kill 3 Winstons, which is kind of insane. That is some crazy tanking ability right there. So the main use of the ultimate is when you jump in, you take a load of damage, and then you pop it to heal yourself up to 1000 HP, and then tank even more damage. The second main purpose of the ultimate once you've got it going is disruption. As you know, when you hit someone while you're in Primal Rage form, you're going to knock them back. So you want to be targeting the people who can do damage or the people who are on very low HP. Your main purpose though is to stop people from doing damage to your allies. So if you look for someone like McCree and start smacking him away so that he gets knocked into a place where he can't shoot your allies, that's perfect. You can now leave him alone and jump onto someone else. You want to knock everyone around all over the place so that they struggle more and more and more to do damage to you and your teammates. If you get someone in a corner, then you can pound them up against the wall and kill them like that. If there's someone on an extremely low HP, then you can jump on them and kill them like that. But the main purpose, other than the second life, is just disrupting the enemies. While you're using your ultimate, you should be jumping all the time. The leap has a lower cooldown while you're in ultimate form, and it does damage. As long as you can control it well, which will come with experience, then you just want to keep jumping to put out that extra bit of damage. Every time you jump, you're doing 50 more damage, so it's worth it. And it makes you harder to hit, and makes you more crazy. And you probably accidentally knock more people around, which is great as well. Alright, so let's talk about when to pick Winston. First of all, let's have a look what maps he's good on. Due to Leap, he's very good on long maps or maps with lots of high grounds, or even just portions of maps with high grounds. For example, on Hollywood, he's almost always picked on the second portion due to there being high grounds everywhere and the fact that he can just jump up and take control of them so easily. Maps like Gibraltar and Numbani are also great maps for Winston as they're very long and again with lots of high grounds that he can control. He's also great on control point maps due to there being lots of health packs around that he can just instantaneously jump from almost any point, and the fact that control point maps are just faster paced in general. He's also good on control point because people clump up a lot on the point, which allows his taser to generally hit more people because they're not as spread out. Which brings me to the next point of Winston is usually picked more on assault maps or control point maps or the assault portion of a hybrid map due to the fact that people are defending a certain point, a control point, where Winston can jump on, his shield is more useful, and he's generally going to be hitting more people for his taser. So you'll see him picked less on payload portions of maps where there's not a specific designated point to fight. People are more spread out all over the place, so his shield is less effective. This is also because Winston is used a lot for initiation, and on those kind of maps with a point, it's a lot easier to initiate. Which brings me to the next point, and that is that Winston is generally picked on attack a lot more than defense. As he is the guy initiating, and defense generally doesn't initiate, it just waits for the attack, you'll see Winston picked a lot more on offense than you do defense. Alright, so let's talk about what composition Winston fits into. Now this is going to be ever-changing, metagame is always changing, so this is going to be based off the current metagame that pro teams are following and is common in competitive ranked games as well. So if you're not familiar with the 2-2-2 setup, which is 2 tank, 2 damage, 2 support, you'll often see him fitting into this setup really well. He's often picked as the second tank. Right now we see Winston used a lot with Xayah as the main tank, as when he jumps in, Xayah can just shield the Winston. It allows him to tank 200 more damage and also charge up the Xayah at the same time. It's a very common attack combination between the 2 tanks, having 2 damage heroes to back them up along with 2 support heroes. You'll see it on attack hybrid maps, attack payload maps, attack assault maps, and also control point as well, where it's extremely popular. You'll also see Winston paired up with Reinhardt as well, if the team wants to play it a little bit slower, if you get in that Winston pick on defense, or if you're pushing a payload, just to have him there to deal with the high ground on a map like Route 66. Last of all, let's talk about more specific cases of when to pick Winston or when not to pick him. So the first one would be if the enemy team has a Reaper. Reaper absolutely shreds Winston, so it's not a good idea. That doesn't mean you shouldn't play Winston at all, but you should be aware of the fact that if Reaper does get to target you a lot, there's not a lot of pressure on him, then you might want to consider switching off to something else. If your team is struggling with Genji or Tracer, then Winston can be a great pick just to deal with them. As previously said, you don't need to aim against them, so they're a lot easier to hit, because a lot of problem with Genji and Tracer is the fact that your allies just cannot hit them. They don't have the aim to hit those shots. Winston can also be a great pick against enemy Hanzos or Widowmakers or any kind of squishy hero that is just sitting at the back and just picking away at you. So if you ever see a Widowmaker that's giving you trouble, you can try breaking out the Winston just to jump on her and take her down. Same with Hanzo. If the enemy team has a lot of squishy heroes in general, then Winston is also a great pick. This is not something you see too much, as most people follow the 2-2-2 metagame in competitive games now, but if you ever do see a bunch of squishes on the enemy team, definitely consider Winston. That does it for this guide, guys. I hope this helped you out in becoming a better Winston player, and I hope we'll see more Safari Daddies played in games, as he honestly doesn't get picked that much on the ranked ladder, even though he's an extremely strong second tank hero. If you guys have got any questions at all, just leave it in the comments below. I'll try and answer it to the best of my ability. Other than that, go enjoy some peanut butter. I'll see you guys tomorrow in the next video. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace.